In the quiet, wealthy suburb of Saxonwold, Johannesburg, stood a compound that would become one of the most infamous addresses in modern South African history. Behind its gates, according to testimony and investigations, business was not always conducted in boardrooms, ministries, or parliament, but in private rooms where political futures, state contracts, and public money were allegedly discussed like pieces on a chessboard. The family at the center of the storm was the Guptas. Ajay, Atul, and Rajesh, three brothers who arrived in South Africa from India in the early 1990s and built a business empire spanning technology, mining, media, and other industries. But their greatest asset, according to the Zondo Commission and multiple investigations, was not a mine, a newspaper, or a company. It was proximity to power. And during Jacob Zuma's presidency, that proximity allegedly became a pipeline into the heart of the state. The scandal would come to be known by one brutal phrase: state capture. It described something deeper than ordinary corruption. This was not just the stealing of money. It was the alleged reshaping of public institutions so that private interests could bend them from the inside. In South Africa, the term became tied to the relationship between the Gupta family and former President Jacob Zuma, a relationship so politically charged that critics gave it a nickname: the Guptas. The accusation was explosive, that a powerful business family had allegedly gained influence over government appointments, state-owned companies, and major contracts. The Zondo Commission later examined whether inducements were offered to influence members of the national executive and whether cabinet positions had allegedly been offered to figures such as Mcebisi Jonas and Vitji Mentor. At the center of the alleged network were South Africa's state-owned enterprises, institutions meant to serve the public, build infrastructure, generate power, move goods, and strengthen the economy. Instead, the Zondo Commission documented how companies and individuals linked to the Gupta network allegedly benefited from procurement, consulting arrangements, and leadership changes at entities such as Transnet, Eskom, and Denel. These were not minor offices. These were the engines of the country. Transnet moved freight and rail. Eskom powered the nation. Denel worked in defense manufacturing. When these institutions weakened, ordinary South Africans felt the consequences in blackouts, debt, declining trust, and a sense that the promise of democracy was being quietly auctioned off. One investigator cited in reporting estimated that nearly R50 billion flowed from government to Gupta-linked entities, though the Guptas and Zuma have denied wrongdoing. Sometimes history turns on a document, sometimes on a whistleblower, and sometimes on a wedding. In 2013, a private plane carrying guests for a Gupta family wedding landed at Waterkloof Air Force Base, a sensitive military facility near Pretoria. To many South Africans, the message seemed unmistakable. This family was not merely wealthy. They appeared untouchable. The landing became a national scandal and forced the Gupta name into public consciousness. What had once been whispered in political circles was suddenly visible to the nation. The outrage was not just about a plane, it was about symbolism. A private family celebration had allegedly crossed into state privilege. The Zondo Commission later examined the Waterkloof incident as part of its broader inquiry into how private influence operated inside public institutions. Then came the testimony. The Zondo Commission, established in 2018 and chaired by Justice Raymond Zondo, became the stage on which South Africa watched its institutions narrate their own attempted undoing. Witnesses described alleged pressure, manipulation, suspicious contracts, and political interference. The inquiry ran for years, heard hundreds of witnesses, gathered massive volumes of evidence, and produced a multi-part final report in 2022. Its findings were devastating. It concluded that state capture had been enabled not only by individuals seeking wealth, but also by political systems that protected the powerful, weakened accountability, and allowed appointments to become tools of influence. The Public Affairs Research Institute summarized one of the report's blunt conclusions. The ANC enabled state capture by protecting Zuma and failing to deal properly with corruption allegations, until it was too late. As scrutiny intensified, the Gupta brothers left South Africa. Atul and Rajesh Gupta were later arrested in the United Arab Emirates in 2022 after Interpol red notices, but South Africa's attempt to extradite them failed when a Dubai court refused the request in 2023. South African authorities have continued pursuing legal avenues, and Gupta-linked cases have remained part of the country's long, frustrating effort to turn inquiry findings into courtroom accountability. In June 2026, South African reporting noted that a Gupta-linked New Lane corruption case was set to resume in September after being re-enrolled, following a Supreme Court of Appeal ruling that cleared the way for the prosecution to proceed. The story, then, is not over. The mansions, contracts, and headlines may have faded, but the unresolved question still echoes. Can a democracy recover what was stolen from its institutions, its treasury, and its people's trust? The Gupta brothers and South Africa's state capture scandal is not merely a story about money. It is a warning about what happens when influence becomes invisible, when public office becomes a private marketplace, and when institutions built for citizens are quietly redirected toward insiders. The tragedy is that state capture does not always arrive with soldiers, flags, or open force. Sometimes it arrives through appointments, through tenders, through quiet meetings, through loyalists placed in strategic positions, through companies that look ordinary on paper, but become extraordinary in access. For South Africa, the Zondo Commission was both a mirror and a wound. It forced the country to look directly at what had happened inside its own democratic machinery. It revealed how fragile institutions can become when ethical leadership collapses, and how expensive corruption becomes when it is allowed to mature into a system. The scandal damaged more than balance sheets. It damaged belief. Belief that government works for the people. Belief that public money is protected. Belief that freedom, once won, automatically remains safe. But the parting thought is not despair. It is vigilance. The exposure of state capture showed that whistleblowers matter, investigators matter, judges matter, journalists matter, citizens matter. A captured state can only survive in darkness, and the Zondo Commission dragged that darkness into the light. The unfinished work now belongs to prosecutors, lawmakers, institutions, and the public. Because democracy is not protected by memory alone, it is protected by consequences. And the final chapter of South Africa's state capture scandal will not be written by the Guptas, or by Zuma, or by any single commission. It will be written by whether the nation can turn revelation into reform, outrage into accountability, and pain into a stronger republic.
Think this story was shocking? The deeper you dig, the darker it gets. Watch our investigative series exposing the rise and collapse of powerful political empires. Hit subscribe to Corrupt Roots and tell us in the comments, what hidden trail of corruption should we uncover next?